Hello, everybody. I'm your host. Welcome back to Saying the President's Name 100 Times. We got the 32nd president today, Franklin D. Roosevelt. And you know the spiel. We're going to say the comments, read some few facts, and then say his name 100 times. But before we do that, can I just acknowledge something? I want to thank everyone who saw the Calvin Coolidge video. I never thought we would get 2,000 views on that. And I never thought we would get 200 subscribers from just doing that video. So, with my whole heart, I thank you all. Which, I mean, isn't that much. I think the reason why it blew up was because Calvin has such a cool last name. I mean, when was the last time you had someone had their last name with cool in it? But at the end of the day, just thank you. Just thank you for watching the video and leaving the comments. I was not expecting that many comments to appear on the video. And, enough of that. But, thank you all very much. So, anyways, my name is Mike Callaghan. And today I'm going to be saying the president's name 100 times, Franklin D. Roosevelt. And with that being said, we're going to read a few comments, get to a few facts, and then we'll say his name 100 times. So, with that being said, we got our comment from Galaxy Kid, and he says, Herbert Hoover is my name and presidency is my game. I like that phrase. I think it's pretty cool. And then we have Arthur Hayden. Am I getting that right? Hopefully I don't butcher that. And he says, Herbert Hoover. And I'm like, yes, that is his name. Now we have Triple with, hold up. What a useless video, man. And then we have Lucky with 2 eyes. And he says, it is, in fact, Herbert Hoover being said 100 times. Not sure why you clicked if you didn't want. So, I'm going to clear this up really quick. Triple, I'm not really mad at you. If you think my video is useless, then you clearly haven't seen my... Well, I mean, this video isn't useless, but this video that appears on screen, what's it called? Fever Dreams? That video is useless. That video is clearly useless. You can see the ratio. I worked hard on it, but it's pretty useless. But then again, he's a SoundCloud music person. His music's pretty good. I definitely give it a watch. I think I listened to Psychosis, and I thought that was pretty good. Anyways, check out these channels if you want, but we still got one more comment. So, Cameron Durfish. He says, I'm sorry, man, I tried. But yeah, those are the comments from the previous video. Quite a lot of emphasis. So let's get straight into these facts. We need to move this along. So Franklin D. Roosevelt, he was born on January 30th, 1882. At Hyde Park, New York, U.S. He was an only child born in a life of genteel luxury, dividing time in the family estate and Hudson River. Lucky. It's probably really nice to be rich back then. He is the only president to be elected to the office 4 times. That's pretty impressive. He also led the United States through 2 crises, being the Great Depression and World War II. Very nice. Good job. Good leadership. He died on April 12th, 1945, Warm Springs, Georgia, from cerebral hemorrhage. I couldn't read that last part. And then bonus, he married his wife to Eleanor Roosevelt on St. Patrick's Day in 1905. I'm actually starting to like this president because I can remember a few things about him. Like on his birthday being St. Patrick's Day. So, hey, if it's St. Patrick's Day, just say, hey, it's the 32nd president's birthday today. And they'll be like, what? And I was just like, Franklin D. Roosevelt? Who's Franklin D. Roosevelt? The 32nd president. How do you know all this? I just watched some dumb person say his name 100 times. Anyways, we said a few facts that I find were interesting, and now it's time to say his name 100 times. So, let me pull up my counter. Alright. Everyone ready for this? Because here we go. Franklin D. Roosevelt. 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 That's 10. Franklin D. Roosevelt. 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 That's 20. Franklin D. Roosevelt. 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 And that is 30. I think it's starting to rain. Franklin D. Roosevelt. 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 And that is 40. Franklin D. Roosevelt. 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 And that is 50. Halfway there. Franklin D. Roosevelt. 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 And that is 60. Franklin D. Roosevelt. 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 And that is 70. Franklin D. Roosevelt. 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 And that is 80. Franklin D. Roosevelt. 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 And that is 90. Franklin D. Roosevelt. 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 And Franklin D. Roosevelt. Thank you all, and that is 100. Thank you all for watching this video or listening to the audio. If you like this video, leave a like or leave a dislike. Either way, it will show that you there's a hiccup. And it shows me that you took time to leave your opinion. And I'm gonna go listen to some breakcore. Triple, thank you for the interaction, because I listened to some of your music and it's actually not that bad. I think you got me into some of this breakcore. I do like electronic music. But with that being said, that's all I got for you today. See you with the 33rd president. And with that being said, bye-bye.